In 2015, in a quiet Utah theater, Alison Krauss walked onto the stage like she had done 1,000 times before. The lights rose, the crowd cheered, and her band began to play. But when she opened her mouth to sing, nothing came out. The silence lasted only seconds, but it felt eternal. That night, one of America's most celebrated voices, winner of more Grammys than any other female artist, walked off stage in tears. No one knew it then, but that moment marked the beginning of her darkest chapter. The prodigy from Illinois. Alison Krauss's story began far from Nashville's neon lights or Hollywood studios. She was born on July 23, 1971, in the modest town of Decatur, Illinois, where her parents, Fred and Louise, were building a quiet, intellectual life. Her father had come to America from Germany in 1952, speaking almost no English but determined to succeed. Through sheer willpower, he earned a doctorate in psychology before moving into real estate. Her mother, of Italian and German descent, made her living as an illustrator, creating artwork for textbooks and magazines. Together, they created a household where art and intellect weren't opposites, they were partners. Books, sketches, and classical records filled the rooms. It wasn't a large home, but it was rich in ideas and imagination. When Alison was 5, Louise decided her daughter needed structure, something to balance her creative spirit. She enrolled her in violin lessons under the Suzuki method, a system that emphasized repetition and perfection. The lessons were strict, the expectations high. Alison hated them. She squirmed on the stool, cried through practice sessions, and often begged to quit. But Louise refused to give in. Every day, 30 minutes of practice, no excuses. It was a battle between a child's impatience and a mother's quiet foresight. In time, that discipline would become the backbone of Alison's entire career. Still, no one could have predicted how far that persistence would take her. The turning point came one hot summer afternoon in 1979. At just 8 years old, Alison followed her family to the Champaign County Fair, where the sound of fiddles caught her ear. The stage was simple, wooden planks, folding chairs, and a small crowd. But the music was alive. She stood transfixed as the players launched into Orange Blossom Special, their bows moving like lightning. These weren't classical musicians in suits. They were joyful, unrestrained, and free. That freedom lit something inside her that technical exercises never could. Within months, Alison begged her teacher to show her bluegrass techniques. Though the teacher reluctantly agreed, Alison quickly surpassed expectations. By the following year, she entered that same county fair contest and performed Orange Blossom Special herself, this time as a competitor. Her hands shook, but the moment the bow touched the strings, instinct took over. When she finished, the crowd cheered, and she walked away with the first-place trophy and $50. It wasn't about the prize. It was the spark that would shape her entire life. As she grew older, her dedication became unstoppable. By age 12, Alison was winning state championships and traveling every weekend to contests across Illinois, Missouri, and Kansas. Her family's car became her second home. They drove through the night, sleeping at motels, chasing one stage after another. Locals began calling her the contest queen. While other kids were at sleepovers or football games, she was performing before hundreds of strangers, bowing her way toward mastery. At 14, she made her first recording, Different Strokes, in a small Illinois studio. Her brother Victor Krauss played bass, and together they created a collection of traditional bluegrass instrumentals. The sound was youthful, yet confident, and though it barely reached beyond regional radio, it marked her first step into professional music. Around that time, Alison's competitive spirit hardened. At a national fiddle contest in Idaho, another competitor once told her mockingly, "Don't worry, my bowing used to be that bad too." Alison didn't cry or argue. She went home, practiced relentlessly for months, and returned the following year to win. The momentum carried her straight into the orbit of Ken Irwin, co-founder of Rounder Records, who heard a demo featuring her voice on a single gospel tune. He was captivated. Most bluegrass singers were rough-edged. Alison's tone was pure, crystalline, almost angelic. Irwin offered her a recording contract before she turned 15. The rise of a new voice. When Alison joined Union Station in 1987, the group was just another local bluegrass band trying to survive. But with her voice at the center, everything changed. In 1989, they released Two Highways, earning their first Grammy nomination. 2 years later, her solo album I've Got That Old Feeling won her first Grammy, and at just 19, she became the second youngest winner in history. The 1990s were the golden years. Alison's blend of bluegrass purity and modern polish brought a new audience to a genre long considered niche. In 1995, her compilation album Now That I've Found You turned her into a crossover star. Her rendition of Keith Whitley's When You Say Nothing at All became an instant classic, reaching number 3 on the Billboard country chart. That same year, at just 24, she made history at the Country Music Association Awards, winning 4 major awards in one night, something no woman had ever done before. The success didn't stop. In 1997, So Long, So Wrong earned 3 Grammys. In 1999, Forget About It blended country, pop, and jazz influences, showing her refusal to be confined by genre. Then came the 2001 film, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, which featured her haunting voice on Down to the River to Pray. The soundtrack went on to sell over 8 million copies. Alison had quietly become the bridge between tradition and the modern era, a woman whose voice could make a hymn sound like a prayer and a pop song feel like scripture. But as her fame rose, the demands followed. Endless tours, constant rehearsals, sleepless nights. For the first time, cracks began to show beneath the polished perfection. What no one saw was how much that soft, ethereal voice cost her to maintain. The silence. By 2013, Alison Krauss had reached a level of mastery most artists could only dream of. She had 27 Grammys, millions of records sold, and a reputation as the most precise voice in American roots music. But while the world saw perfection, inside, her voice was beginning to fracture. It started as a subtle tension, a tightness in her throat after long rehearsals, a fatigue that seemed impossible for someone so disciplined. She ignored it. Every singer has bad days, she told herself. But the bad days kept multiplying. When doctors finally gave her the diagnosis, dysphonia, it didn't feel real at first. A condition that locks the muscles of the throat, silences the voice, and has no cure. You've got to stop singing, they told her. For Alison, those words felt like a death sentence. The stage wasn't just her workplace, it was where she'd grown up, where she'd lived her entire emotional life. Losing it meant losing herself. At first, she tried to hide it. She pushed through concerts, relying on muscle memory more than confidence. But by 2014, things had grown impossible. Notes cracked, her throat burned, and sometimes even speaking became painful. She canceled shows without explanation, disappointing fans who had followed her faithfully for decades. When she appeared, her voice sounded strained, and speculation began to swirl. Some whispered it was exhaustion. Others thought she was burned out from fame. Only those closest to her knew the truth. She was fighting her own body every time she opened her mouth. Then came Utah, 2015. That night changed everything. Standing under the stage lights, Alison began to sing, and suddenly no sound came out. Panic set in, not just in her, but in her band. Guitarist Dan Tyminski quietly stepped forward and took over the song as Alison turned, walked off stage, and disappeared into the dark. The audience didn't know what had happened. Some thought she was ill, others thought it was a technical issue. But for Alison, it was the moment her career and identity shattered. She returned home to Franklin, Tennessee, and closed the door to the outside world. Her website went silent. The band paused all touring plans. Even her friends described her as withdrawn. She couldn't bear to talk about it, couldn't bear to explain what it meant to be a singer who could no longer sing. For months, she barely touched her violin. The house that once echoed with rehearsals became quiet. Her son Sam was her only constant companion, watching his mother fight a battle no one could see. In those years of silence, she questioned everything. Who was she if she couldn't perform? What did decades of awards and applause mean now? She read, reflected, and tried to rebuild her confidence one note at a time, but every attempt brought new fear. Even in private, her throat would tighten mid-song, as if her body was warning her not to try. Fans called it a hiatus. Insiders called it burnout. But for Alison Krauss, it was a collapse, a complete loss of control over the one thing that had defined her since childhood. What no one realized then was that the silence wasn't just a pause in her career. It was the price of perfection. Years of emotional restraint, endless pressure, and the weight of being flawless in an industry that never allowed her to be human. The silence was her breaking point, and the beginning of the long climb back to herself. The long road back. When Alison Krauss finally accepted that she couldn't simply push through her illness, the recovery became her new full-time job. But this wasn't a recovery like the public imagined. No glamorous health retreats, no quick miracle cure. Dysphonia wasn't an injury, it was a mystery inside her own body. Doctors and vocal specialists could only guide her so far. The rest would depend on patience, humility, and the willingness to start over from zero. She began working closely with Ron Browning, a Nashville-based vocal coach known for training major singers through career-threatening vocal injuries. Browning didn't treat her like a star, he treated her like a student. Their sessions weren't about hitting notes, they were about breathing, posture, and mindfulness. "You can't sing with a clenched heart," he told her once. Alison laughed, but she knew he was right. For years, she had lived with her shoulders tensed, her thoughts scattered across tours, interviews, and expectations. Her throat had simply mirrored her mind. Progress was painfully slow. Some mornings, she would wake up feeling hopeful, only to lose her voice before lunchtime. Other days, she'd manage a few fragile verses and burst into tears. Not from pain, but relief. To the outside world, it seemed like she'd vanished, but behind closed doors, she was waging a war with silence. She compared it to learning to walk again after forgetting how to move. Every vowel, every tone was a risk. She filled her days with small routines, meditation, gentle fiddle playing, short walks with her son Sam. Family members said she became quieter, more reflective. The woman once known for her sharp memory and tireless work ethic now spent hours doing breathing exercises in complete stillness. She learned that healing wasn't about discipline this time. It was about surrender. "You've got to clean off your desk," her teacher reminded her, meaning she needed to let go of everything that cluttered her thoughts. For a lifelong perfectionist like Krauss, that was the hardest lesson of all. By 2016, she began cautiously returning to the studio. The project would become Windy City, a collection of 1960s country and pop covers that reflected her nostalgic heart. The sessions stretched on for years, nearly 3.5 in total, because she refused to record on days when her voice felt unstable. "It felt like trying to sing through a straw," she said, describing the frustration of wanting to express something her body wouldn't allow. Producers waited. Musicians stayed patient. Everyone around her sensed how fragile the process was. When Windy City finally came out in 2017, it sounded nothing like her previous work. Her voice was lower, more textured, not broken but transformed. It carried the ache of someone who had lived through silence and survived it. Critics called it a masterclass in vulnerability, and longtime fans heard something new in her phrasing, a tremble that felt human, not polished. For Alison, the album wasn't about sales or awards. It was proof she could still exist as an artist. But even after the record's success, she didn't rush back into fame. She turned down projects, limited performances, and often disappeared for months between appearances. When she did perform, she moved cautiously, testing her limits each night. Then came 2023, a Las Vegas show with Robert Plant that turned into déjà vu. Midway through, when the levee breaks, the same feeling returned. The tightness, the panic, the silence. Without a word, she walked off stage. People online speculated again, exhaustion, nerves, age, but they missed the truth. The real fight was invisible and unpredictable. Some days her voice soared effortlessly, other days it vanished without warning. Yet unlike in 2015, Alison didn't break this time. She had learned that silence was not failure. It was part of the rhythm of survival. The long road back wasn't about conquering her illness. It was about learning to live with it, to respect its limits, and still find the courage to sing. Redemption and real reason. Then in 2025 came Arcadia, her long-awaited reunion with Union Station after 14 years. The lineup had changed. Dan Tyminski left, replaced by six-time Bluegrass Male Vocalist of the Year Russell Moore, with fiddler Stuart Duncan joining for the tour. Alison produced the record herself, carefully curating songs about loss, longing, and survival. The lead single, Looks Like the End of the Road, had been sitting with her since the pandemic. When she finally heard it again, she said, "That's the one. That's how it begins." The album debuted at number 1. One on Billboard's Bluegrass chart, and fans rejoiced. But Alison made one thing clear in interviews. This wasn't a comeback for fame or glory. It was about gratitude. After years of silence, she'd found peace with imperfection. "You have to clean off your desk," her voice teacher once told her. "You can't sing with too many things on your mind." For Alison, that became more than advice. It became philosophy. The real reason she walked away wasn't just illness. It was exhaustion, the kind that comes from decades of perfectionism and pressure. She needed to stop to rediscover herself, to remember that music wasn't just a job, it was home. And when she finally returned, her voice carried something new. Not just beauty, but truth, the sound of a woman who had almost lost everything and learned how to begin again. For Alison Krauss, silence wasn't the end. It was the lesson. She found strength in losing what she loved most and came back with more soul than ever before. Do you think artists should push through pain for their fans or take time to heal, no matter the cost? Tell us your thoughts below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories behind the music.